Hey everybody, me again. I just wanted to make this video. I'm not going to even say it's a short video because it's probably going to end up being closer to 10 minutes long like all my videos are. But this is just a simple video, I should say, on what a 250 transmission is and how to identify one is I guess, the point that I'm trying to make here. So this here is my parts car. And as you can see, I have taken apart everything. I've taken all the parts off it that I want. Front clip, front bumper, all the belt-driven stuff, all the, everything. The hood's right there, drive shaft's off. All my interior stuff is taken off. I took all the trim moldings and crap off. These are these chrome things I would take, but they're both bent on both sides, so they're kind of junk. But anyway, I've got off what I need off of it, except for the transmission. And while I'm taking it off, I might as well make this little video. So, what a 250 transmission is a very, very light-duty 350 transmission. It's the same transmission, it's the same pan, bolt pattern, it's the same case, it's the same, virtually the same everything. It is just a very cheaply made version of the 350, and it didn't start out that way. I didn't actually know that the 250 existed. It's a very, very rare transmission nowadays because they're just junky. They didn't hold any power behind them. They were just crappy. They'd fail a lot quicker due to the second gear assembly, which I'll get into in a minute. But they just don't last as long. They're not as reliable. They're just a very crappy version of a 350. So nobody bothers to rebuild them. They just put a 350 in since it's exactly the same as a 350 in every way except for the internals. So basically what it is it didn't start out as a crappy thing. It started out as a alternative to the Turbo 350. Turbo 350 uses a second gear piston and clutch pack, and while that's a very reliable system of putting the car into second gear, you're never going to lose second gear because it's an actual physical gear. It's also an issue with where the piston that sits on the back of the oil pump, you know what it looks like if you watch my other transmission video. If you're looking at down your transmission, you got the oil pump right here, and you take that off and you look at it on the back, and there's a piston with a bunch of little dots on it all around it that you won't recognize if you're used to rebuilding the transmissions that, like the 200 that I tore apart, doesn't have the piston on there. What that piston does is when you put it in when it shifts to the second gear, it pushes the back on the clutch pack that wants to push out. So the pressure of the tranny is going to push the clutches down or forward, and the piston is going to force it back. And the flaw to that is that as reliable as it is, the harder that you make it shift into second gear. So if you're flooring it going uphill and then let off the gas and it shifts, it is going to bang that clutch forward at such a high rate that it will want to try and push that piston out of the pump. That pump is going to want to come out of the tranny, and usually it doesn't. But you do it enough times, and those bolts, the lining of them, is going to get worn out, and it's going to want to come out, and eventually you're going to blow the pump out of your transmission. And that was an issue that the 350s had. It's a very rare issue. It doesn't really happen, but it happened enough that in the 70s, General Motors thought, well, we're starting to get into these transmissions with second gear intermediate bands that hold the drum, the intermediate drum in place so that clutch pack can engage. And back then it was kind of a weak system. They didn't really want to mess with it too much or anything, but what they thought is they could take a sacrificial 350, and instead of using a second gear clutch and piston, they would use a second gear drum and a band. And it was an experimental thing. So what they did is they put that transmission behind very light duty cars like a Chevy Chevette or an Oldsmobile Phoenix or Omega, or the very light duty cars that Pontiac Ventura, that kind of thing, the cars that nobody wanted any power out of. They're just economy cars. So they put the 250s behind them, and it worked in the sense that it was reliable and it didn't have that hard shifting issue, but it didn't work in the sense that because it's a band and the clutch material on that is like skinnier than that, it doesn't last very long. The bands would get burnt out of them. It's a very thin band too. It's not a thick one like you saw on the 200. When I rebuild this transmission, I will rebuild this transmission on video. I'll record it just for the thought of, you know, nobody's gonna know. There's one video. I found one video on YouTube on how to do this. So this is actually more up my alley than the last transmission video I did, where there was a lot of information and I was sort of just running my mouth about stuff I didn't really know. Anyway, the band on this is about, no joke, about like that. That's how thick, you know, in width it is. And the clutch pack on it is, or the clutch material is like probably that thin. Like it's not even a 1/4 inch, not even an 1/8 of an inch, not even a 1/16 of an inch, microscopically small. So what would happen is your second gear, you'd lose your second gear after say 35, 40,000 miles. All the clutch material would burn off the band and it would be completely useless. You have to take the transmission out and rebuild it. And GM just realized, even the dealerships realized, that it's a 350 with a second gear band instead of a second gear piston. So why are we going to rebuild this transmission when you could just put a 350 in for an extra 100, 200 bucks? So that's what they did, and most of the cars with 250s don't exist anymore because the 250s were all junked and put in a 350. This car has a 250, and I was very surprised at that it did, because this car's got at least 107,000 miles on it, maybe 207,000. But I'm leaning more towards 107,000 because the carburetor was untouched. The plugs on the bottom of it were untouched. The choke was still riveted on from the factory and non-adjustable, was untouched. This car had never been touched by anyone but a certified dealer. So I think that it's probably only got 100,000 miles on it, because this transmission, I find it very hard to believe that this transmission made it that far without being rebuilt. But everything I've seen so far is kind of pointing towards that. But anyway, now that you know what a 200 is and that it does in fact exist, I will get into how to identify them. And I'll put this timestamp in the description of the video, so if you just came here to find out how to identify one, you can just click to that timestamp and you'll bring it right here. Anywho, how you identify one of these things, there's 3 ways to do it. And there's one really, really easy way if the transmission is stock. And again, I'm not sure of anybody who'd actually want to modify one of these. So chances are, 99 out of 100 times that you'll find one of these, it will be stock. The other 2 are more secure ways of deciding if it's a 250 or a 350. But once again, I'm going to start with the easiest. And the easiest is, underneath here, if you look underneath it, you'll see that the transmission pan, it's a 350 pan, right? But it's got this big X stamped in it. This is a 250 pan. 350s are flat, just like the 200s and the Power Glides and the 400s, all that stuff. It's flat. There's nothing on it. 250s have that big X there, and some people say X marks the spot for shit, so get rid of it. But that's a 250 pan. So if it's stock and hasn't been touched, it will have that pan and is a 250. The other way, if you want to take drive shaft out, is the output shaft is hollow. See that? There's a hole in there. It's hollow. That's why this transmission can't hold any power, because that thing will collapse under any kind of torque that you put on this thing. So it's not worth anything for off-roading or racing or anything like that. So it's junk. But that's a light-duty output shaft. That is a 250 tranny, because only 250s had that. And then the most definitive, because you could possibly get a light-duty tranny of a different kind with this, and hell, if you go to a junkyard and you need a 350 pan and all there was a 250, it's got the same bolt pattern, you could throw that on there. So there's a chance, a small chance, but there is a chance that you might find a 350 with a 250 pan. The easiest, but the most for sure definitive way is on the side of the transmission, up in there, right, there's the vacuum modulator. Past that, up there by where I dropped that wrench, there's a little screw, and it's like an upside down screw. I'll try and stick my camera up in here. See that bolt right there, right below the wrench? It's kind of rusty, it's sticking out. I can't point to it because my camera is all the way up in the in the deal. But that is the band tension adjustment bolt. And that's selective, so when you take that out, you want to count how many turns it pulls out. But beyond any of that, that bolt right there, that's a band adjustment bolt. And if it's a 350, it will not have that bolt on there. So that signifies that it is a 250 transmission, not a 350. So those are the three ways that you can tell if one of these is a 250 or a 350. That's the point of this video, so I'm going to end it after my outro here. But yeah, that's what a 250 transmission looks like. Pretty easy to identify. Just like if I like once again, if it's stock, you look underneath it, it's got an X on it, it's a 250, not a 350. So there you go. Next video I post will likely be the transmission rebuild video on this. If not that, my Lincoln's been having a rich condition and it's been stalling lately, so I might do a video on that depending on how difficult it's going to be. But anyway, as always, I'll see you in the next one. Hope this helped anybody who needed it.